It's my pleasure to welcome you both here in the room and online to our first distinguished speaker event of the Trinity term. So kicking off with a great event today. My name is Amy Major. I'm the MBA Programme Director here at Saïd Business School, and delighted to welcome you from our accredited degrees and beyond into our exec ed community, and people from outside of the school and those of you dialing in online. It's perhaps quite fitting that I'm here from the MBA today, as the idea for this event was first brought to us by MBA alum Paul Autique from our 24-25 cohort. And I think it's proof that as students in this business school, most things are possible, but sometimes take some time. And so we are absolutely delighted to, nearly a year out, I should say, from the original idea, to be joined by the CEO of Tony's Chocolonely, Douglas Lamont. Douglas has had several years, a hugely successful time with Tony's, and formerly, as you may know, a long career with Innocent Drinks. So we're here for Tony's Chocolonely Unwrapped. We're really looking forward to a short keynote from Douglas, followed by what I'm sure will be a really exciting conversation with Paul. And I think we've already had some great questions submitted by the audience. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Douglas to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the chocolate, for those of you who got here in time. I'm going to go really fast. I did one of these under time conditions the other day, so I can do it in 10 minutes, so hopefully we'll go quick, because I think the Q&As and the questions are far more interesting to engage in depth. But this hopefully just gives you a bit of a framework of who we are, what we stand for, you know, why we think we make a difference in the world. So I want to start with a question for all of you. You know, do you think that 1.5 million children working in child labour in West Africa is okay? Anybody want to be brave? We're at the intellectual school here where you can put your hand up. Clearly, it's not okay, but that is what is happening today in West Africa. You know, we've got 1.5 million children working in child labour conditions every single day, producing the beautiful sweet treats for all your favourite chocolate brands. Fortunately, back in 2005, a bunch of journalists didn't think it was okay either, and they weren't looking to set up a company. They were looking to investigate abuses in a number of different industries, and they decided to focus on chocolate. They went to West Africa and were shocked to discover the scale of child labour that was going on, the fact that all the big chocolate companies had made a commitment to change back in 2000 and nothing had been done. And so they basically created a TV series bringing up this topic, and they went further and further. They first of all raised awareness, and guess what? No one paid attention. Tone then got himself arrested by proving that he'd broken an EU law that if you're aware of child labour in a supply chain and then you act upon it, he was complicit by eating the chocolate bars, because he knew it was going on. He ate the chocolate bars and he walked into a police station in the Netherlands and said, "You need to arrest me." They looked at him very strangely, and eventually it got thrown out by the High Court, but by this point they had caught the public attention. And then finally, they realised that none of the big guys were going to change. So they said, well, let's do it for ourselves. And they did it Dragon's Den style, The Apprentice style. They said, okay, well, how do we do this for ourselves? And they filmed themselves effectively creating a stunt chocolate bar and selling it at the Willy Wonka Charlie and the Chocolate Factory launch that came out in 2005 at a stand next to that. They sold a huge amount of bars, having got this publicity around it, and the company was born. And the whole point is that the impact came first, and the company, to some extent, happened by accident. And that's why we say we are an impact company that makes chocolate, not a chocolate company that makes impact. And that's a really important distinction, because we lead with impact. We lead with what we're trying to achieve and the progress that we're going to make. To get there, we have kind of, three key pillars. Our why: together we'll end exploitation in cocoa. That is not just about us not having exploitation in our supply chain, they set out a much more ambitious framework to say, our mission is to change the whole industry. We're not done when we eradicate exploitation out of our own supply chain. We're only done when the whole industry changes. That's a huge ambition to take on, and it's something that continues to drive us every single day. Again, early on, a really clear framework about how to go about it. You know, creating awareness, being very vocal about child labor, about those kind of issues that nobody was talking about, nobody wants to talk about. No, when you're enjoying your bar of chocolate, do you really want to hear about child slavery that is involved in making that bar of chocolate? No. But really upfront, making sure that people are aware of the issues, because only once you're aware can you solve those issues. And then leading by example, and hopefully in time inspiring others to act, and I'll come on to talk about those. And then clearly values for those of you entrepreneurs thinking about setting up your own companies. You know, having this combination of why, what, and how is really important, because having values inside your business to guide people to create a framework for action is also really important. So what does an impact-led company really mean? It means that our number one priority is not how much we sell, is making sure that our supply chain model actually works, actually drives change on the ground. And so over the last 20 years, we've been honing, editing, changing, improving our 5 sourcing principles. We've very focused on being data-led as well and measuring everything that we do so we can see change. And what we see is that these 5 sourcing principles work. They drive down child labor rates. You know, the typical child labor rate in West Africa is 46%. So every other farm you go onto, you'll find a case of child labor. After 5 years under this program, on our farms, it's less than 4%. So it gives you a really good example of how you can drive change in complex environments. And we can get into this more through the questions, but it's not also, you don't get to pick one. It's the combination of everything that makes this work. So we've been working really hard. That has been our number one priority. But a sourcing model needs something important. It needs volume. You need to actually have some volume going through a sourcing model to actually test and learn and edit. And clearly, building the brand Tony's is yes, it's cool to build a big global brand. More importantly, more revenue equals more beans equals more impact on the ground. And so that's how we think about the chocolate brand. It's just a source of volume into our model that is driving that impact on the ground in West Africa. And to do that, again, for those of you who like building brands, it's a lot of fun, right? You've got to have a great quality product, and everyone talks to me about what makes the difference with Tony's. Is it the sustainability? In food, if you don't have a great tasting product, you can be as ethical as you like, but nobody comes back for a second try. So you need to have a damn tasty product with great packaging, with great standout. You need to have a willingness to be bold, challenge brand. Our marketing levels are tiny compared to the big guys. We spend less than 3% of our net revenue on marketing spend, which is very low for our industry. And so therefore you have to think really carefully about how you use your voice, how you do stunts, how you stand out. And again, over 20 years, we've got a long history of doing that in a really punchy way. And also, then you have to build a team. I mean, a mission-led culture is absolutely critical to attracting the right talent, attracting, hopefully, people like yourselves into our business. Because in industries like food, if you can attract high talent, you can move much faster than your competitors. If you get that flywheel working like we did at Innocent, like we are at Tony's, the ability to outperform in your industry is really high, but you have to get the culture right. The final part, and I think this was the critical step for Tony's, we know that we have to prove that we've got a sourcing model works, but we also have to prove that we can scale it. And in 2018-19, we realized we weren't scaling fast enough as our own brand. There weren't going to be enough beans going into the system, so the big guys couldn't pat us on the head and say, "Oh, that's really nice, but it doesn't scale. It's for, it's a toy. You couldn't do it at our scale." So we had to work out how can we scale this thing faster, and we created Tony's Open Chain, where we said anybody, our competitors, other people that use chocolate, can source their beans through us. That allowed us to open up our model, and we sell those beans at the same price to others as we sell them to ourselves. that allowed us to scale the business so much faster. What does that look like? I think the fonts have gone a bit funny, but effectively, we guarantee ethical beans, we guarantee all the issues around deforestation, so we take away the issue of child labour and deforestation risks for someone like Ben & Jerry's, who source all their chocolate for their ice creams through us. We take that problem away for private label retailers. So here in the UK, if you go into Waitrose, there are Waitrose private label bars with our Tony's Open Chain stamp sitting on shelf next to Tony's bars at a cheaper price. Now you might go, why the hell would you do that? Like, you're giving your competitor your key point of difference. Well, that's the point. If you're a mission-led brand and your mission is to change the whole industry, Tony's Chocolonely being as big as it can is not the most important thing. The scale of beans that you're putting through your supply chain is the most important thing. And we made the judgment that opening this out, collaborating in cocoa and competing on shelf would create a bigger impact on the ground. So now half the beans that we source are for other people and half for ourselves. That's a huge, transformation in scale for us that allows us, again, to keep proving that the model works at scale. Now, we have a deep spike in cocoa as a company, but if you're going to really live up to the values and principles we have, you have to be good all round. You have to think about that in multiple different ways. And so as a company, beyond what we do in cocoa, paying farmers a living income where typically we're paying 50 to 80% premiums on top, we also give 1% of revenue to our foundation. Last year that was 2.4 million as a charitable donation, who support community projects. So that's building schools, helping journalists in West Africa have a voice. We don't see that as our cocoa sourcing, we see that as supporting the communities from where we come from. Many others, again, say building a school is part of supporting, is what we do for cocoa farmers while we underpay them. We pay them right and support their communities. Doing that, those two things are very different. One's charity, one's your business model. And our 5 sourcing principles are our business model that we have to prove that works. This is supporting communities in a charitable way. We're a B Corp. We have a score of 125, although for those of you who know B Corp well, all of that's changing. So we're about to go through the recertification under the new rules, but I think we're fairly confident that we'll hit all the minimum thresholds and make sure we pass. But again, making sure that you think about how you're a responsible company all the way around. B Corp is a great framework to do that. It allows your team to ask really, really good questions about things they should be thinking about. So getting the score is one thing. I don't really see it as a marketing tool. I see it as a tool to encourage your teams to continuously improve. And then finally, and maybe we can talk about this in detail a bit later, we have a mission lock. So often with companies like ours, people are cynical. It's like, yeah, you're doing it because it looks good and it helps you grow your company, and then you're going to sell out to one of the big guys and they're going to ruin it all. Well, we have a mission lock where we have a golden share in the company that's held by 3 independent mission guardians in a separate trust that has no economic value but has quite a lot of power, because we can't change our articles of association, which defines what our mission is, defines how myself and the management team need to act against that mission. So that can't be changed without their say-so at any point in the future. So they have that mission lock there. They also have escalating powers to, if we haven't changed the words on the paper but are acting differently, they can, for example, in our annual report, they have 2 free pages that they can write what they like. I have no right to edit those pages whatsoever. So my annual report could say, oh, we're wonderful, aren't we amazing? And then these 2 pages say, no, they're lying, it's all a load of rubbish. That's not a good look. So again, and then they have right to escalate ultimately to the Chamber of Commerce in the Netherlands, which is where we're based. So again, a powerful tool to build confidence with employees. This was important for me when I joined, and we set it up as I joined. I don't want to, I'm passionate about what we're doing. I'm passionate about this area, showing that, good companies can be big companies. I don't want to do that work, commit 10 years of my life, and for that to be undone in the future. That gives me confidence as an employee, but hopefully it gives confidence to suppliers and consumers as well that we mean it, and we mean it for the long term. And it's working. So these are the beans that we're sourcing in West Africa. As you see, the yellow box is what we're sourcing from other people. And you see the amount of additional scale that we're able to generate and the additional impact by opening up our supply chain, collaborating in the supply chain, competing on shelf. And from a revenue point of view, that's now quite out of date. So last year we actually did 240 and we're well on our way to 300 million of revenue. So we're growing incredibly fast, with the US now becoming our biggest market with over 100 million of sales in the US. So this Dutch company now, all my Dutch team are getting used to the fact that they're no longer the big dogs. The US team have now got a bigger business than them. So again, from a culture point of view, shifting your business to think more internationally has been an interesting journey. So, that if you go right back to that first slide, together we'll end exploitation in cocoa. This is not about what Tony's does. This is about us influencing everybody to think differently about this sector. And yes, we want to influence the big guys to change their behaviors, but every single person in this room has a role in it. You're all consumers. I assume most of you buy chocolate. Think more carefully about what chocolate you buy, where's it sourced, how's it sourced, what commitments have they got. And I don't care whether you buy Tony's Chocolonely chocolate. I do care you buy one with a Tony's Open Chain stamp on. So for sure, if you like the Waitrose one, all good. But as long as it's got a Tony's Open Chain stamp on, because that's the mission, that's the change, that is the beans on the ground that make a difference, not how big is Tony's Chocolonely, the brand. So again, depending on where you fit on this map, think about how you can make a difference, how you can contribute. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to butcher it now, is the Anita Roddick one. For those of you who think small people can't change the world, have you ever been in a room with a mosquito? All of us have a role to play. You can have a powerful influence on the world. You've just got to be intentional about that and act on it, not just sit back and go, well, I can't do anything about it, so I'll just carry on as I am. So be intentional is my message. As you think about how you're going to be intentional in influencing change in the chocolate industry, I'm going to play you a little video of a lady who says what I just said in 40 seconds. We got this spoken word artist to come into one of our events, and she just did it so amazingly. I was like, okay, I don't need to give speeches, I'm just going to play that. But you've heard the long form version. This is now the ChatGTP, Claude, perfectly polished 40-second summary of what I just said. Please, while it's playing, think about how am I going to be intentional in changing the chocolate industry. Do I need to click?
Once upon a time, we all had our parts to play. We worked together with our farmers, guaranteed them honest pay. We traced our cocoa beans and thought the long-term way. We were mindful of what we bought. We worked together and took action. We explored a different narrative, one in which it was not only us, but several main characters. Chapters divided equally, plot lines casually met. We told our story to our colleagues, to our kids, and to our friends. We repeated it for days and weeks, tried really hard to change our beliefs. We wanted not a fairy tale, but a reality to be proud of, because we realized that only then our story could be fair again.
Thank you very much. I think I'm now going to get grilled.
Hi, Douglas. Hello, everyone. I used to be sitting here 1 year ago. I was doing my MBA, and I was trying very hard to get Douglas to come and do the speech. Douglas is a busy CEO. Tony was growing very fast, so it took me 1 year to get him here. But here we are, so I'm very happy. Welcome, Douglas.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So if, Douglas, my first question is if your LinkedIn is up to date, you've spent 15 years at Innocent Drink. At that time, sustainability was not so central in the food industry. Why did you start already at that time? What drew you into it so early?
Yeah, so one step further back, my parents were entrepreneurs, so I sort of grew up around the kitchen table listening to business chat. So I always knew I wanted to be a businessman, but I never sort of knew what that actually meant. But one thing I saw from my parents' company was that they were really strong on culture and creating a kind of what I would call a family atmosphere inside that company. And that stood with me as to, the type of company I wanted to be part and help grow. And actually, if I'm really honest, that's what attracted me to Innocent and why I joined, was because the founders were building a kind of different type of company with a different culture, and sustainability was part of that. And they were very early in the thinking of, ultimately leaving things better than they found them. And that was both in terms of how employees felt about joining and leaving the company, and obviously from a kind of sustainability point of view. I would say my kind of passion on why this really, really, we have to really be intentional here, grew through my early years at Innocent, where then you started to see the realities and the change started to happen, and it was clear that we were on the right path. And so my passion has sort of grown with Innocent. I actually got attracted by the culture as much as the sustainability side, but then big convert, I guess, from that point on.
Okay. And then, you spent nearly 10 years as CEO.
Yeah.
And then moved to Tony's. At that time, Tony's was much smaller than Innocent, smaller than it is right now, but also much smaller than Innocent. How did the transition go? It was like, also Tony's was like like a small team with like very strong.
Yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment. I having built everything nicely, I decided to do it again. I think it's just how you're built. I started to find it Innocent that it was big, and all I was doing was kind of starting to, it's not quite this unfair, but being in charge of governance and sort of leading committees and making sure risk was managed and whatever. And the thing that wakes me up and gets me excited every day is being in the fire pit of making change happen and everything slightly going wrong and giving it form and structure and shape. And so I think I realized I've got that kind of entrepreneurial gene in me, but I guess I was never brave enough to start something on my own, having seen my parents go through all the dramas of building something from scratch. So that kind of 100 million to 500 million sweet spot where there's something to work with, but it's not yet fully formed, is my passion. So I was like, okay, I was looking to move on from Innocent. I felt like after 16 years in one category, enough's probably enough, thinking and dreaming about smoothie flavors. And then obviously the Innocent founders are also invested in Tony's, and so the conversation evolved from there of like, do you want to do it again? Yeah, come on, let's do it. And Tony's is, it's so special and so unique, and I just, it's been obviously it was a huge privilege to run Innocent, and to have an opportunity to do it on another amazing brand like Tony's was too good to give up. And obviously now we're scaling it pretty quickly up. So yeah, we've more than doubled the company in the last 4 years. So it's good fun.
Talking about scaling up, often we hear that there is a bit of tension between performance, or maybe I should say profitability, and purpose and sustainability. Do you feel this tension? And if yes, how do you manage it?
I feel that I'm really fortunate, both even when I was at Innocent and even once Coca-Cola owned the business, I never felt the pressure from them to kind of compromise on what we stood for. They were very clear the reason they bought us was because we stood for that, and they were great. They gave us, and because they can think long term as well with a brand like ours, I never felt that pressure from them. Where I feel that, similarly at Tony's, whilst we have a mix of founders and private equity, again, that private equity is kind of evergreen family fund private equity. And the reason they set up those funds was to build purpose-led companies. So again, I don't feel the direct pressure from the shareholders. Where I feel the direct pressure, and therefore it's me to manage that tension, is we have to prove that Tony's is not a chocolate distribution charity. We have, because otherwise the industry doesn't change. If I can't convince, if I can't show that this is a profitable business model, I can't convince the big chocolate companies to shift, because they'll just go, well, maybe your shareholders will live with that, but mine certainly wouldn't. So if we want to deliver on our mission, Tony's has to be a double-digit profit company in time for the other guys to say, well, the economic, we're creating great value for our shareholders, we're delivering strong profitability, we're one of the fastest growing chocolate brands in the world. This isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And so I'm trying to build the economic case for change in the industry. So I feel the pressure for that reason, not because some shareholder's saying, I'd like a bigger dividend, please. It's part of my change model. And it was the same at Innocent. I was there to prove that big companies can be good companies, and the criticism was, well, you don't make any money. And then in time, when we started making money, well, you're not very big. And then we got bigger, and then, okay, maybe.
And so yeah, we saw on the graph you're doing it quite well. Tony's is growing fast, still quite profitable too. But if we look at the industry, not only the chocolate industry, but the food industry, there are not a lot of purposely led company that are doing that well. What do you think is like the biggest challenge and for them, and how did you overcome it?
It's just really hard building a company, and so not many. There's two things about food. In particular, it's hard to scale across geographies. It's not often that you find brands that work across multiple European markets, for example, and other than the ones owned by the big multinationals who they bought up over time. So they're not. So you can grow to a reasonable size or share in your market, but cracking the kind of international expansion in food is really hard, because supply chains and shelf lives and all of those things and the retailer dynamics are so different market by market. You have to think very differently depending on which market you're in. So I'd say one of the barriers is geography, and it's hard to grow a massive company just in one geography. But yeah, what you have in food is obviously commodities that move around a lot, and anyone who's been paying attention to the cocoa price the last 2 years, I mean, it went up 5x, 500%. I mean, crazy prices, which we've had to weather, and we're a medium-sized company, and quite frankly, we nearly went bankrupt in the last 2 years. So if you're a tiny company, it's just been impossible. And so you get these big commodity swings going on in food, which again, regulating your cash flow, getting the confidence of investors to keep giving you more money when your profitability isn't just a smooth graph up, it's quite lumpy as well. Some years it's good, some years it's bad. So there's lots of reasons why it's hard, but those are a few.
Also, during your presentation, you shared a bit about the Tony Open Chain. I think I was myself in Cocoa before joining the MBA. I think that's a super cool initiative, quite bold, to get people, like you said, competitors on shelves, collaborate on the cocoa. How did you manage in the past, but still today, to convince your competitors sometimes, or other brands or competitors of any of your mission allies to join the program? What is your strategy? How do you do that?
So obviously they have to pay so the biggest barrier is clearly price and the premium to come in. Part of that is offset by the fact that we solve some problems. If you're running the supermarket right now, and you've got a lot of private label, you've got this big dashboard going on, and where are my sustainability risks? And cocoa in West Africa it's got deforestation, it's got child labour, it's got living income issues, so it's flashing red on most people's dashboard as a commodity. And what Tony's Open Chain does is solve that in one. It's if we source through them, all those red dots turn green. And so from a kind of, when cocoa's not your main crop, it represents a high risk for a low part of your supply chain. So in a way, we've won quite a lot of business from the supermarket private label, because they're great, it's a sort of packaged solution to my issue here, and we're prepared to pay the premium. And if you look at, I think Albert Heijn and Waitrose and others are really leading the way on sustainability, more so than brands. I think that a lot of the supermarkets are really stepping up to the plate because they see the power of it. And I'm sure in some of your case studies, you've been doing the rise of private label. I mean, it's an amazing phenomena over the last 5 to 7 years in particular. The innovation going on in private label and the share of private label across all categories is growing really quickly. And if you'd said 10 years ago private label was a thing in chocolate, everyone would have laughed at you, but it's increasingly becoming a big player in private label in chocolate as well. So I think we've been helped by the fact that a lot of private label supermarket brands have come to the table too.
Today you represent more or less, you were telling me 1% of the West African cocoa.
Yep.
Tomorrow you want to reach 5%. Missionalize will be a big part of it. You were also sharing with me that it's not on the graph because we were missing the last year, but today they represent 50% or nearly 50% of all the cocoa sourced through Tony Open Chain.
Yep.
What is your view on that? Is it like the 5% of the West African cocoa, you would like to do it 50-50, or how do you see it today?
I don't care.
You don't care, yeah.
I mean, I honestly, if your mission is more beans equals more impact, where those beans come from, I don't care. I'm scaling the model. Whilst we sell them at the same price to everybody, including ourselves, we all share the benefit of spreading program costs. So the cost of the sustainability element, if you like, of all the programs we do on top of paying the living income premium comes down. So the gap between people that are doing it and not doing it also narrows. So then the cost of sustainability also comes down on average for everybody, which hopefully then drives more people in because it's like, oh, it doesn't cost that much more to do it this way. Let's do it. So yeah, I mean, clearly I want Tony's Chocolonely to grow because that's your anchor tenant. Obviously, we have long-term contracts with all these players for 5 years, but they can choose to do something differently after that. So you want an anchor tenant in Tony's that's a big part of that. So yeah, if I'm 5% of that, that means I'm probably heading towards being $1 billion brand, and I'll be pretty happy about that. So all good.
And again, and on this Tony Open Chain, because that's something I found really, really interesting. Okay, you managed to do it in cocoa, and I was trying to look a bit in the other commodities, and I don't see anyone who managed to do that. And you've been doing it for quite a number of years now. So how come the others, like coffee, I don't think there is anything like that in coffee, or even on anything, cotton, cashew.
Yeah, we're part of, what I talk to my team about is, we're here to do this in cocoa, but we are here to inspire others to act in cocoa, but we're also here to inspire others to act in other commodities, because I think a lot of people are looking at Tony saying, well, if they can do it, why can't we do it in our industry? So I think there's lots of initiatives, but as we've seen, it's taken us 20 years, and also each industry has its unique things. The unique thing about cocoa is that 60% of the world's cocoa comes out of 2 countries, Ghana and Ivory Coast. And the problem that we're trying to solve is very concentrated in those 2 geographies. You look at coffee, it's much more widely dispersed, and the issues, some are general, but some are quite specific to the geography. Even between Ghana and Ivory Coast, the problem is slightly different because the way that the governments operate the system within it, and the government role here is really important as well in cocoa. So I think, as ever, it's a bit of the specific conditions of the commodity that have enabled us to be quite focused on particularly Ivory Coast and Ghana, which has helped us prove our model where it needed to be proved.
Now, a bit more like on the challenges the industry is facing. You've been quite vocal and did really a great job and shared it in your reports on child labor. You're also working on deforestation, but you're less vocal about it. Whereas deforestation with the UDR has been also a big topic also for climate change, and cocoa is a big driver in this region of deforestation. Is it a choice?
Yeah, no, it's actually a choice since I've come on to talk about it more. I think we were very focused on child labor, and before we used quite a lot of emotive language around slavery and other thing that we've moved a little bit away from, because for me, exploitation gives you the manner to talk about child labor, living income, and deforestation. And so what we're trying to do is balance our messages across those, because all 3 are really important issues in our supply chain. As ever, you get into the classic marketing thing, but just focus on one thing. And the minute you start spreading the message, people start to get confused about what your message is. So finding that tension, but whilst it's not been in the headlines of the message, we've for a long time have been very focused on making sure our cocoa is sourced from non-deforested areas in West Africa. And now, obviously, the EUDR legislation is sort of mirroring what we've been doing for the last 7 or 8 or even 10 years, which is good. We've been very vocal about making sure EUDR does get implemented, and it's the legislation that will require all companies to understand where they're, down to individual farm level, where their products come from. That's the key unlocker, because one of our 5 sourcing principles is traceability. Once you have traceability, you have to know who your farmer is. Then it's just an economic choice whether you pay them a premium or not. In the past, in cocoa, there's been no traceability. They've said, oh, well, if we give the middleman at the port in West Africa the money, he's bound to be corrupt. We'll keep it for ourselves. We'll keep it for ourselves. And so if they now say that, oh, it's structural, we can't give it because we can't identify a farmer, it's like, well, then you're illegal and you can't sell in the EU. So for us, EUDR is critical as one of those tipping point changes to push the argument, not from, oh, it's too hard to implement, to you're just making an economic choice to get more profit for yourself and less profit for the farmer who is living in abject poverty. And I think that with consumers sits much more uncomfortably than, oh, well, I'm sure it's complicated, so I understand why they can't do it. So we're just trying to remove the barriers to change, and EUDR is central to that. So we're being very vocal, as are some of the big chocolate companies, I'm pleased to say. So Barry Callebaut, Nestle, Mars are all being very vocal, because everyone's now ready. So there is willingness in the industry to start making a change, which is good. So there's positive signs that people are realizing that we need to change this industry.
During your presentation, you also mentioned that in the last even 2 to 3 years, like, cocoa price was super volatile. It's been a big challenge for a company like yours in terms of working capital needs, but also it made alternative chocolate maybe more interesting, or more like economically more interesting, or like give more attention to alternative chocolate. We are seeing a lot of companies, small startups growing in this industry, even like a large company like Nestle acquiring or developing themselves, like or spending money on research and development. What's your view on that? And also I wanted to know, do you see that more as a solution, or like actually no, it's an issue for the chocolate industry? And for the farmers, I mean, for like...
I think it's complementary. I think where you're seeing most of the change, so with prices going up so much, the most people that have been exploring those alternatives are, and there's been a few lovely headlines in the UK, where chocolate's a secondary part of the product. So whether it's sprinkles on cookies, whether it's the thin layer of chocolate on the penguin biscuit, there are things that you can change there and reduce the amount of cocoa in it and put kind of alternatives in, which means you're not allowed to call it chocolate, but it still tastes vaguely chocolatey. That's where demand has created, because when the price goes up so much, if it's not your main thing, you go, well, give me an alternative. Yeah, that tastes roughly right. Our view, and we've been very forthright about this, if you changed our bar, reduced the amount of cocoa, whatever, people would notice the taste. We're not doing it. We're not reducing the size of the bar. We're just going to put the price up. And we've, like a lot of people, we've put the price of our bar up by nearly 50% in the last 2 years. Because we're like, in the end, consumers will pay for the quality. I've seen nothing out of any of those alternatives yet that make economic sense or make taste sense in a kind of what I would call a mainstream chocolate bar. Maybe in 20 years' time, but I'll let the big guys waste their money, and then I'll copy what they do once they get it right. So,
maybe a last questions I wanted to ask you before opening the questions to the people here is, we saw in your slide the company is growing very fast. You open new markets. The US is also growing, still profitable. But I would like to know, today as the CEO, what is the next big opportunity you see, and also what is the biggest challenge or the thing that scares you the most? The thing that excites you the most and the thing that scares you the most as Tony's CEO.
I talk about myself, I'm not CEO of Tony's Chocolonely, I'm CEO of the mission. And so the thing that excites me the most is create the conditions that a tipping point comes that forces a meaningful change across all big chocolate companies to go, actually, now's the moment we're all going to hold hands and do something differently. And I'm an eternal optimist, but I genuinely think that tipping point is coming, accelerated by the crisis we've just had, where it's not just what I would call the sustainability departments of those big companies. The CFO is now realizing, if I underinvest in the farmer and get the cheapest chocolate price, when there's a climate shock, yields go down by 30%, whereas if I'd looked after the farmer, they had more money to invest in fertilizer and disease management and productivity. Yes, the yield might have been down 10%, but the global commodity price wouldn't have spiked 5x, it might have gone up 2x. The difference between those two things is billions and billions of pounds that have been wiped off the value of all these big chocolate companies in the last 2 years. It's like, that economic theory of investing a little over the long term rather than getting the cheapest price today, I think that's landing with people. So how do I grab that and accelerate change with EUDR, with that now in the head of CFOs? We're trying to create the conditions for a tipping point, and it'll be a scandal, or it'll be something that will actually unlock it in the end. It won't be what we do, but we're one of the players in it, and it's exciting to be. We're no longer the mosquito on the outside annoying everybody and telling them everybody. It feels like we've got a seat at the table, which I feel like we've earned, and now we've got to use that wisely to encourage and facilitate the conditions that really change this industry. Because, as I've said, us doing it alone, 1% of beans, so what? You need to move the other 99% meaningfully, because on the other end of this, there's 2.5 million farmers living in poverty in West Africa right now, while we all get to enjoy delicious chocolate, and that's just wrong and needs to change.
Thank you. Any brave person with the first questions? Maybe there? You know, the lady there, the microphone is coming.
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for this talk, and it's always amazing to see how a company scales and has like this impact-driven mission first. So my question is, I love like the wrapping and the packaging of Chocolonely, so I wanted to know, how does the impact get translated into the packaging? Is there a link between both of them?
Yeah, the original package designs were like, what the industry doing? Let's do the complete opposite. Let's be disruptive. And I think, one of our values is outspoken, and I think that's come through in everything that we do. So the bright colours on shelf and multicoloured as a brand completely disrupts the category code. If you think about Cadbury's here, everything's purple, and we're kind of messy and bright. I think the best example of that, I was telling some of the guys earlier, in Australia, none of my team have been to Australia in Tony's capacity anyway. We've invested no marketing. We gave the product to a distributor. That distributor has got national listings in Woolworths, Coles. The product's really working, all through word of mouth, all through it stands out on shelf. So that's step one, someone noticing you. Secondly, it's got to taste damn good, because, as I said earlier, if it doesn't taste any good, people aren't coming back. So that's the bit we got right from the beginning. The packaging plays a massive role, particularly where you've got very limited marketing budgets, to create that point of difference. And then I guess the third thing we've done, for those of you who had our bars, the unequally divided pieces was a great storytelling device to explain about inequality in the supply chain. And we get loads of hate mail on it. It's like, I hate your bars, like they break and they crumble on my floor. My sofa's got marks all over it. Why can't you just have square bars? And every time we get them, we celebrate. It's like, let me tell you a story, because generally it's people that don't know. So let me tell you about the inequality in the supply chain, and they go, "Okay, I'm terribly sorry. My sofa's fine." So again, it's about creating those points of disruption in a similar way with our advent calendars here in the UK and a few other markets. We miss out in one of the doors. There's no chocolate behind it, and we just wait. 9th of December, we wait for it. We're ready. Like, GB News goes off the charts. Like, these woke bastards, like, who do they think they are, trying to tell us about ethics in the cocoa supply chain when my kiddie didn't get their chocolate? And, of course, 99% of people are perfectly reasonable and sensible. And it creates the conversation. So that being bold and creating that tension, rather than, like, let's keep everybody happy as a brand. I think we've sort of gone, no, let's get in their face. And I think that's been, from a brand distinction point of view, I think not being afraid to get in their face. Let's talk about child labour. That's quite a hard thing to talk about when you're trying to enjoy a chocolate bar. Let's talk about it, because then you normalise it. And again, I was saying earlier to some of the team, the biggest issue on child labour is that the big companies don't want to admit where it is today, because they're afraid of class actions in the US, or being this or being that, or just the consumer horror of one of them saying, yeah, actually we have got 40% child labour in our, that's just the facts. I mean, so, but they can't say it for themselves. And if you can't say it for yourselves, how do you begin to then correct it? Because then it's like, well, we do this work, then we won't get any credit for it, because no one will know it was bad in the first place. It's like, let's just talk about it. So again, one of the things that we're, in terms of removing barriers, like I have child labour in my supply chain today. So that is a fact. Why? How do I know that? Because I go looking for it every year. I visit every single farmer, every single household to identify those child labour cases. And when we find them, we remediate them and we do something about it. That's how you drive it down from 40+% down to less than 4%. And of course, we're working on the rest, but stuff happens, right? You find those cases. Farmers aren't choosing that. The kids are in child labour because they can't. The father or the parents can't afford workers at harvest time to harvest the trees, and there are certain moments where that has to happen. So the kid doesn't go to school. He's there with a big machete, with a big cocoa pod, doing that every day. And guess what? They get chopped their kneecap off. They chop their fingers off. That's the realities of it. It's not, if you gave them the choice, they want to send their kids to school. The economic conditions don't allow them to do that. So the kids are spending way too much time with hazardous pesticides and big machetes than going to school and educating themselves out of a poverty cycle. Oh, well, I'll let someone else do that.
So just maybe something on the calendar, to come back on the calendar.
Yeah.
On one day there is no chocolate beef. Correct? On another day there are two.
So the first year we did it. And there was no door, and got exploded. And then someone in trading stand said, "Well, you said there were 24 doors." So now what we do is we put 2 in another door to make up for it. We actually put it the day before. I think we should put it about 3 days later to make people feel bad, and then they discover there are actually 2 later. But there are still 24 chocolates in the thing. But again, it's marketing. It's there to make a point.
Hi. Thank you so much for the work that you do. It's very inspiring. I'm a founder in the travel tech industry, and I'm learning a lot about building great brands as well, because I think the work that you're doing in the chocolate industry, we need that in the travel tech industry. So that's part of the work that I'm doing. My name is Felix Ochefu. I'm a postgraduate student at the business school. So I have a bit of a spicy question for you. How do you manage, if any, savior complex when navigating sourcing in West Africa, whether you personally or your team?
Say that again, sorry.
How do you manage savior complex when navigating sourcing in West Africa?
I go once a year. I go because it's what you see is really hard, but it gives you an amazing amount of energy to go. One, we're miles from being done here because the context is tough. When you get in a truck and go 3 hours into the middle of nowhere and you find families living in nothing, I mean, it's just abject poverty, and they're still part of your supply chain, that's a pretty sobering moment. And you're like, and we're good compared to a lot of what's going on. The other part of it is you can see the difference, and we visit co-ops that we're involved in and co-ops we're not involved in, and we bring partners like Waitrose and others with us, and you can see the difference. The way that part of our sourcing model is called Strong Farmers, and it's about building cooperative relationships. It's about building them into business, not a farmer that just has to take the price that the guy at the gate is, but building them into little mini businesses so that they have the power. Seeing those communities thrive and seeing them strengthen so that you have a sense of eyeball conversation with them. We give them 5-year contracts where we commit to paying a living income, which is at this sort of 50% premium to them, but they don't have to commit to us. So if someone else comes along with a better offer, they can sell to them. So it gives them the power of decision making, not oh, we're the benevolent guy paying more, so you have to give it to us. You have to commit to give it to us. So we're trying to create that strength of relationship. I get the energy from seeing them each time we go back, seeing those co-ops be stronger, more entrepreneurial, building legs to their business that is cocoa farming. And that's the power of it. But yeah, sometimes seeing the abject poverty is tough, but it drives me, I guess. I use it in a positive way to come back and say, let's make this happen.
Hello, thank you. I have a question. I was interested when you were giving your talk about expanding into new markets and sort of starting as a Dutch company and moving into the US. Are you actually nervous about that? Do you think people are, just in terms of like culture difference, both in terms of maybe day-to-day working, but also corporate mission, corporate social responsibility, the way that doesn't necessarily look the same in all parts of the world?
Yeah. I think there's enough people in every market that share your values are, for me, fairly universal. I mean, different people have different values, but there's enough people in most markets in the world that would share similar values to me. It's about finding them and then engaging them. So the mistake we made at Innocent when we first started to do international expansion, we were like, you have to know our mission, you have to love it. Let's send some Brits to France to go and set up Innocent. It was the biggest freaking disaster in the world because Brits abroad, like who knew and felt passionate about Innocent, knew nothing about the French trade, nothing about how the French business culture works. So what we found was what I have to do is find people that share the passion for the mission, passion for the values, and then use their expertise to build the business. And my experience is that we've never been short of finding those people, whether it's in France, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Germany. Like, I've always found good, bright, capable people that share our values and then can fall in love with our mission, and then they know their market, so then they do a good job executing. So that is it. I think where it gets harder is, when the zeitgeist of that market and how do people adapt. But I think that's then for marketers just to judge what are the key messages, against our exploitation mission. Are we talking a lot about child labour? Are we talking about deforestation? Like there's room to manoeuvre as to what's the thing that resonates market by market. But also you have to be a bit brave and say, well, yeah, but I'm not going to compromise. I do believe in this stuff, so you have to kind of hold a bit of a line as well. And in this era, a bit of backbone sometimes is dangerous, but is also important.
Yeah, we had one.
I'll let someone else pick who's.
Mine is a really easy question.
Yeah.
Well, nice question. What's your favourite flavour of Tony's?
Well, we just launched this week. See, the marketeer in me. If you go to Waitrose, we've just launched 3 filled bars, and the new hazelnut-filled ganache bar is just out of this world. Obviously, our salted caramel bar is like this. I mean, we sell more of that than anything else, and that's a household favourite as well. But that new, hazelnut praline, go for it if you can find it.
Hi there, thank you so much. I was curious, when you do discover issues in your supply chain, like you mentioned that there is child labor, how do you actually go about remediating and building capacity in your suppliers to work with those issues?
Yeah, I have 30 people on the ground in West Africa working directly for Tony's, and so we have a remediation team that will then work with the individual households to identify what those barriers are, and they can be as simple as, my child hasn't got a bicycle and the school's 4 kilometres away, to, there's kind of power issues in the household, and those are much more complex to manage. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but a team of kind of 4 or 5 experts that can have some resources and experience about how you unlock and solve those child labour cases, and do it as quickly as we can, and typically they take about 6 months to sort of identify. The main thing you're actually trying to do is educate the parents what is good, what is right and wrong, and a lot of time the parents are like, that's child labour? Okay. So sometimes it's education, sometimes it's sort of delivering against specific needs, and sometimes it's a bit more complex than that, but it's a sort of blend of those. But it's being committed to it and putting the resources in place to solve the problems themselves are not that difficult to solve as ever. It's like, are you prepared to commit the resources to identify them and solve them? And yes, we are. I'm not going to point. It's causing trouble.
Hi, Douglas. It's great to have you here. And for those of us in the MBA community who don't know, we also wrote a case at the Skoll Center on Tony's last week. So do look that up because this work is incredible. So Douglas, thank you for being here. And Paul, thanks for bringing him. Douglas, you were interviewed by the Financial Times in 2024, towards the end of the year, at a time when there was a lot of discussion around the role of CEOs in culture and the extent to which CEOs should or shouldn't lean in to what might be called cultural issues, right? And I thought that the way you handled that interview was very wise, and I just wondered how your thinking has emerged, if you could give some views to our students on that, on how you see the role of business in public, and what advice you might give our students.
So advice number one, even the Financial Times is after clickbait headlines, because I did this whole thing about open chain and all the things we're doing in West Africa, and the headline was, Tony's CEO tells other CEOs to stay in their lane. I was like, what did I say? I didn't say any of that, so my PR team were like, oh my God, what's he done now? So the question was, how do you handle things? The headline, I don't agree with. I wasn't telling any other CEO how they should go about it, but that was how it was written up. But the point I made was, through the last 10 or 15 years, being a CEO suddenly has felt like you need to have the answers and an opinion that you need to vocalize on everything. And we can get into the breakdown of family relationships and what role do your employees looking for you to, but also, so I think we've tended that everybody's felt like the CEO has to kind of offer an opinion on every single topic. And I through Innocent and at Tony's, I do really feel that we should offer opinions on the things that we're experts on, and we should have principles about how we run things inside the company on different topics. Diversity and all those things, you should run them well for yourself, but you do not need to be a public commentator on every single topic and be a kind of hero. Like if you look at B Corp, right, it stands for a lot of things. I don't need to be a hero on every single topic that other B Corp companies might be standing for. I don't need to be standing there. I need to make sure that what I do helps me deliver on my mission. And if I'm going off and talking about these topics and getting the brand in hot water over here, does that serve my mission? So I'm very careful about where I'm vocal and not vocal, and I'm very vocal, and as you've seen, not backwards and coming forward about criticising the industry and whatever on the topics that we really want to change. On the rest, I believe we run a very ethical B Corp company, but I'm not in the papers gobbing off about each of those topics every single week. I think that serves our mission the best, and it's the right balance between demonstrating to our employees we're good all round in the way that we treat them, but I don't need to have a megaphone on everything, I guess is the way that I see it.
Maybe we don't have much more time, and I wanted to finish on like 2 questions. So maybe a last one, and then, and then I'll...
Thanks very much. I wonder if you can share any insights into the demographics of child labour, the gender balance, girls and boys, are they equally affected? And actually, what ages are we talking about?
Yeah, so it's a really good question on the gender balance. I don't know, but I think it will be broadly even. Secondly, the definitions of what child labour is shifts with each age group. So they're kind of 6 to 8, 8 to 12, 12 to 16, and then at 16 they drop out of being considered a child. And so if you look in our annual report, which you can find online, we have the breakdown of each demographic of what it means to do child labour at that work. And generally we find it's sort of evenly split across most of those age groups in terms of the incidents that we find. On the bigger percentage, because it's quite an old report now because no one wants to release their data, on the sort of 45%, I don't know the split on those, but I would say it's not concentrated in you know, again, when you see it with your own eyes, and I've seen it with my own eyes, like I saw 6-year-old kids with machetes, and you're like, oh my God. Like that's just, it doesn't mean, oh, it's all 14-year-olds. It really is it's whoever they've got in the household because they need hands to do the work and they can't afford to employ people. It's as simple as that.
Maybe 2 more questions from me. You have in front of you a lot of current MBAs. I'm sure some of them would like to be at some point in their life in your shoes. What suggestions,
Careful
what advices would you give them?
I think the point I made at the end of my thing, be really intentional about the difference you want to make in the world. Like I did a exec MBA at Harvard, and I was lucky that I had a lecture from John Cotter, and he did this whole amazing thing about personal change, where he said, like, 1, do something you're passionate about, like don't do it for the money, and be really intentional about the change you want to make in the world. Do something cool. And if you do something cool, something you're passionate about, and be really clear as to why that's making it a better world, because we are very short of leaders right now, and you're all in an incredibly privileged position. You are the next generation of leaders. If you guys don't do anything about it, we really are screwed. So be intentional, do something you're passionate about, and work bloody hard, because change is hard. And it takes work, and it doesn't fall in your lap, and it just takes energy and passion to make this stuff happen. So, I don't know whether that's good or bad advice, but that's what made me go, actually, I'm going to leave corporate finance and go and join kind of innocent world, because it was like, yeah, I want to join a company that's actually making a difference.
And the last questions, in front of you, you still have a lot of MBAs. Some have already secured a job, others maybe not. Most of them, I'm sure not.
Hey, come on.
Are you hiring? And in which functions?
I am hiring a lot of people at the moment. Actually, we're growing. Whether I can afford any of you guys is a whole different question. So, on our website is all our jobs pages. If you want to move to Amsterdam, where most of the jobs are, but the sales and marketing jobs are everywhere. But yes, we're always looking for bright and capable talent, because that's the lifeblood of a business like Tony's. As I said, if you create a culture that attracts great people, you outperform in the category pretty quickly.
Thank you very much, Douglas. It was a pleasure to be here with you.